What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
Guys, today we are giving you our first thoughts on the newly announced UFC 217 main event for the vacant 155 title, Charles Oliveira versus Ilia Topuria. And Nick, this is a really exciting fight. You know, Ilia has come out and said he's still chasing Islam. He knows Islam has moved up to 170, but he's looking for that fight at some point. And so a lot of folks are saying that he may be overlooking Charles. And the general consensus with pretty much 8 out of 10 MMA fans that you would ask say that Ilia Topuria's got all the skills he needs and he's going to get his hand raised. But I think that there are some things that we need to not overlook with Oliveira. He's a very skilled fighter and there are ways he can win this fight. So I want to break down technically what each man needs to do to gain an advantage, and then just kind of give our early thoughts on how it plays out. So starting with Charles, what are some things that you think that Charles can implement in order to get the jump on Topuria?
So I've been looking forward to breaking this fight down. And yeah, I want to get into what Charles can do because a lot of people see his path to victory being very narrow, and I have to agree with that. We can't see Charles Oliveira make very many mistakes if he wants to beat Ilia Topuria, and unfortunately, we do see him make some of the same mistakes over and over again. That doesn't mean he loses every fight he makes a mistake in, but Ilia is one of those guys you really can't make more than one mistake against, or you're going to wind up unconscious. So the one thing that sticks out to me is Charles is a taller guy. He's going to have a little bit of a reach advantage, and even though Topuria comes in and knows how to get inside, and he's really most dangerous once he gets past that kickboxing range, Charles Oliveira does have a hard time keeping people out there. So one thing he's got to do, which he doesn't do quite in every fight, or we don't really see this as a common move in Charles Oliveira's arsenal, is he's got to start moving around every square inch of that cage. Ilia Topuria is the kind of guy that stalks you, hunts you down, and then finishes you. So if Charles Oliveira is a stationary target to be hit, he will be hit. And we've seen him get dropped while being stationary against other great fighters like Michael Chandler, and the list goes on. Charles Oliveira gets dropped by most people, but Ilia Topuria landing those same shots after he's filled out this 155 frame is different. At this stage in Charles Oliveira's life, and the chinniness and the fact that he's been in so many wars, I mean, you don't get your name all over the UFC's history books without going through a gang of wars. So I'm worried about the susceptibility of him getting knocked out, but I do think there are paths for him to win. And a couple of things, a couple of positions that I think he needs to really consider and game plan for is if Ilia tries to take this fight to the ground. So Islam Makhachev was able to submit Charles Oliveira. The only way Ilia could compete with Islam by not fighting him, but in this fight, is to go out there and beat Charles Oliveira more convincingly and faster than Islam did. Also, a little extra credit for bonus, which I'm sure Ilia is thinking about, is if he can submit Charles Oliveira, the submission king, faster than Islam did. That's the kind of stuff that I think Ilia might be considering and trying to game plan for. And that is really alarming if you're a Charles Oliveira fan, because Charles Oliveira, when he does get dropped or he starts to, get wind up in a grappling exchange with somebody, he tends to concede to the back or look for a jiu-jitsu type of maneuver or jiu-jitsu style path to get out of those positions. Maybe it's through ground strikes, maybe it's through submission attempts, but
guard work, stuff like that. Yeah,
right. But against Ilia, he's got to learn how to wrestle up immediately. As soon as Ilia, whether he's feinting takedowns or he's actually shooting in, you got to wrestle against that. You can't play jiu-jitsu because the top control from Ilia is insane. He's very good at controlling somebody from the top. We know his strikes are hard, but ground and pound is even more brutal at times when you can't evade at all, and the ground is keeping you where your opponent wants you to be. And the other thing is Charles Oliveira being able to utilize some of that reach in the tie clinch. Now, Ilia is very dangerous in that close range, as I said, and his most deadly weapons are his near side hooks. If he can get inside, even if you want to grab full tie plumb on him, he'll throw hooks that are very heavy and likely get the better exchange, a better of the exchange in that situation. But if he doesn't do that, it's still opportunities for him to find big shots on the break. And we've also seen Charles get hit there as well. So I know that's a bit long-winded, but Charles Oliveira does have a path to victory. I just see it as being a very narrow one and one where he cannot afford to make any mistakes.
Yeah, I'll give you my 2 cents on Charles before we move into how Ilia can win, because I do agree with you. I think that the path for Charles Oliveira to beat Ilia Topuria is way more narrow than the path for Ilia to beat Charles.
Okay.
But there are a few ways, and I think range control and management is everything for Charles here. Charles does have really good long straight punches. He's also got really good kicks up the middle, knees up the middle, stuff like that.
Right.
I think at a kickboxing range, Charles can contend and hang with Ilia on the feet as long as he doesn't get too wild.
Right.
We've seen Charles get wild in the past, and it's cost him. But I mean, Charles gets dropped in a lot of fights, and a lot of those fights he ends up winning, as you pointed out. So that's Charles does have the ability to weather the storm, but Ilia is a little bit of a different animal. When he hits you, it's very, very difficult to get back up off the canvas. So I think management of the range is everything. He needs to either stay long or be very close in tight with the tie plum, because Charles is going to be taller. He does have a good clinch, so he could snap the neck down of Ilia, throw some knees up the middle, some elbows, but there again, he has to be very careful on the break, because that's where Ilia can really knock your lights out, because he'll have a split second there where he's in that close range where his favorite hooks and uppercuts are right there, ripe for the picking.
Yeah.
So I think Charles' range management is going to be everything. Totally agree with you that he does not need to concede jiu-jitsu, the classic jiu-jitsu positions, the guard, stuff like that. He needs to wrestle up when he gets taken down immediately.
Right.
You're not going to land a triangle on Ilia Topuria. You're not going to omoplata him.
Zero chance.
Get out of the bottom position as fast as you can, wrestle up, and look for some strikes on the scramble.
Yep.
The other thing is he's got to stay off the cage. Ilia's really good, just how he finished Volk. When he gets you against the cage, the range... You have one way to change the range when your back is against the cage, and that's to go forward.
Right.
Because there is no going back. The cage is right there. So
and the range is equidistant if you're going laterally, right?
Exactly.
So you can't actually change the depth of the fight when you're doing that.
That's right. And Ilia is really good with those power hooks of keeping you in the middle, because you go to the left, boom, the hook over here. You go to the right, you have the hook there. And then he's also got the uppercut as well, aside from the straight punches that we all know that Ilia, possesses. So the thing I think that's really important for Charles is to not get pinned against the cage, manage the range really well, and do not concede bottom position. Whatever you do, I don't care how good your guard is. I don't care how many people you've triangled. I know that you're the highest submission artist, the most decorated submission artist, rather, in the history of the sport and in the history of the organization. But that's not what is going to get you to the belt against Ilia Topuria. You've got to wrestle up. The only way Charles is going to submit Ilia is if he hurts him and gets to his back or something like that. Then work jiu-jitsu from that position, but do not work it from the bottom.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that point. But telling Charles Oliveira to not try a little jiu-jitsu, not throw up one submission, is like asking Dustin Poirier to go out there and not try to jump the gilly. The one that I said is famously one of the best submissions in all of UFC, only to be reminded he hasn't finished anybody with a guillotine.
Yeah, but you did say in a video that Dustin Poirier has one of the best guillotines in the UFC.
And I stand by it. I think, if you can get Khabib in, and most guys can't even get Khabib into that position, but that's a topic for another day. We're not talking about Islam, Khabib, or any of them. This is Ilia and Charles. And I do kind of want to get into a little bit of the X's and O's of how this fight can go for Ilia.
Before we finish up this conversation, Nick and I found something that is quite concerning. Most of y'all that watch our videos are actually not subscribed to the channel.
What's up with that?
Guys, if you're getting value out of our content, a subscribe to the channel costs you nothing, and it helps us out tremendously. Now back to the conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because, again, if we're talking about path to victory, his is a lot more wide than Charles's. I honestly see 3 paths to victory, and the one that is the least likely, in my opinion, is the decision. I don't really see Ilia having the fight go his way, the game plan work the way he wants it to, and Charles last 5 rounds.
Yeah,
I just don't think that can happen. If Charles goes out there and makes it a dogfight and turns out he's a whole lot more competitive against Ilia than anybody's giving him credit for, then we might see a decision, or hell, we might even see Charles get his hand raised. But again, I'm not 100% leaning that way. And the most likely way I see this fight ending is brutal KO round 1 or round 2, just because Charles is always willing willing to oblige in a war. He's always willing to bite on his mouthpiece and just chunk some leather. We've seen it many times, like in the first round. That's why we kind of are talking about it for years now. Charles Oliveira doesn't get the credit that Justin Gaethje and Michael Chandler do, but he's equally as exciting of a striker and fighter as those guys. And it being willing to oblige in that is one thing, but doing it with Ilia is a different story, and I think it's a little bit more risky, especially given Charles's chin this late in the game. And then the other thing I think, which is kind of the dark horse, but I think there's a very real possibility that we see this happen. Islam was able to submit Charles Oliveira, and he did it, he didn't have to deal with too much adversity, but he did have to cover a few minutes a time, a few rounds a time. If Ilia Topuria wants to battle with Islam and say, you know what, I'll take the 155 belt as soon as I get it, I'm vacating it because I want to go fight Islam. The only way you can compete with Islam in this fight and continue the narrative to try to better your chances at getting that fight at 170 against Islam is if you go out there and submit the submission king faster than Islam did. And that's why I think if you just go straight grapple for grapple, I don't think he could submit Charles Oliveira as quickly as Islam did. But I think with the damage he does with his hands early on in the fight, he will be able to open that up. And everybody knows the old saying where you might have a black belt, it might even have a couple stripes on it. But as soon as you start getting punched in the face, those stripes start to disappear. And then all of a sudden you're a brown belt. Oh, now you're a purple belt again. Now you're a blue belt. Eventually you're unconscious and you don't have a belt on, right? But that's sort of what I see. And if Ilia Topuria lands some of those power shots early, I see him actually hunting for a submission, going back to his old ways, his pre-UFC days before he was just KOing everybody, and goes out for a submission simply to prove a point to Team Khabib and Islam, and then only pine himself even more for that 170 title fight.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what Ilia does differently because he's actually got a new head coach. His camp, he said and it wasn't a contentious sort of thing from at least from what he explained. Yeah, that's what they always say. But, he said it's a scheduling thing. His coach is busy. He's busy. They live in different parts of the country. And
it's more of a money thing.
I probably, I mean, to be honest, it probably is. But I'm interested to see, what his wrinkles are because every time somebody's in a new camp, we always see a different version of them. And that's not always a bad thing,
right?
But it does usually take a couple of camps with a new coach to kind of really come into your groove with that coach. That's an X factor for me. I'm interested to see that. Ilia Topuria needs to, I think if he keeps his head on straight and goes into this fight just to beat a very, very dangerous opponent. Like, let's not mistake that. I know Charles is a big underdog. I know we can sit here and talk for hours about how Ilia can win. And it's more difficult for us to create content around how Charles can win, but he certainly can. But don't mistake that for thinking that Charles is not dangerous and that Charles cannot win this fight, because he certainly can. So Ilia needs to remain focused on the mission at hand. And that's where when you say he's going to try to submit Charles faster than Islam did, that's where I start to get a little concerned, because I could see that too. But when you start to do things like that, do you decrease your overall efficiency because you're trying to prove a point to somebody else?
Right.
And when you're in the cage with Charles thinking about somebody else, that can be a dangerous proposition for you. So I think he needs to do what got him to the dance, which is really good fundamental boxing, very good top pressure grappling, and stick to that game plan. Charles is a fighter who is not, when you think of the lateral fighters, the Sean O'Malley's, the Israel Adesanyas that can move laterally on a dime. Now they're on the side of you and they're hitting you where you can't hit them. That's not Charles.
No.
Charles is a come forward Muay Thai fighter. He marches forward, which also for a wrestler is a great thing, because you know exactly where the momentum of your opponent is going directly towards you. It's hard to take, in wrestling, you actually get discounted points for backing up.
Right.
So in wrestling, people are used to people coming forward.
Right.
And so when Charles also fights very upright. So when he's upright and moving forward, that's the perfect opportunity for Ilia to feint and shoot a takedown. So he needs to land the ones and twos. He needs to shoot his takedowns. He does not need to be afraid to go to the ground with Charles. If Charles does concede the bottom position from the guard or whatever it is, he needs to start doing ground and pound damage. Don't rush for the submission or the KO early. Let it come. And I think that if he does those things, he can find himself victorious, because for Ilia, this fight is sort of a good matchup for him. even though Charles is so dangerous with the submission, I kind of negate that a little bit because Ilia's top pressure grappling is so buttoned up. He's not a guy that you're just going to throw a triangle up on.
Right.
So his posture is really good. His ground and pound's really good. I think he needs to take his time with it. And he will either, if he does that, he will either find the finish either on the feet with boxing, or he'll find it on the ground with good ground and pound that maybe could lead to a submission.
I love it. And you made me think of something. So you brought up Sugar Sean and the dynamic strikers of the UFC. Right. Charles Oliveira is not one of those guys, but that is the style that I'm envisioning he needs to sort of emulate if he wants to get his hand raised. He's got to move a lot. One thing we know about Ilia Topuria, and he's damn good at it, is he comes in with a high guard and he stalks you. And one thing that's really interesting about his style of pressure, and I've really tried to study this lately, is he puts his high guard up and he gets beyond kickboxing range to get to where he wants, which is punching range, boxing range. But when he gets there, he doesn't even look to throw offense until you're starting to feel the pressure, until you start to throw some stuff, and then he makes you pay for every one of the mistakes you make. That part is so interesting to me because Ilia comes in like a guy that looks like he wants to just take your head off, right? He wants to just go in there, not even let you punch, make you feel like you're a heavy bag, but that's not what he does. He does approach with a sort of stocky hunter style entry, but he doesn't throw anything. He's 100% buttoned up for his defense. His hands are up. He's ready to parry and slip. He's got really good head movement. He checks the kicks pretty well, but he also lets people just kick his legs. If you want to do that, go ahead. I'll close the distance with some big punches and make you pay for it. Now your back's against the cage. So I think that that aspect is very interesting. And if Charles Oliveira winds up being, sort of stationary like we've seen him in the past, again with the Muay Thai style coupling that makes him a more stationary and square target, which is even easier for Ilia to attack more aspects of the body. Remember, Ilia's not going to go out there and try to just kick with him all night. He'll kick a little bit, he'll kick the legs and stuff, but he likes to set up big body punches and head punches, and usually the body punches set up the head punches. But if you aren't doubling down with your defense and being extra cautious with a guy like Ilia, one of those shots can end your night. So Charles Oliveira has to move a lot. Almost try to pretend like you're somebody like a MVP or a Sugar Sean. Just move. And every time Ilia looks like he's trying to track you down and stalk you and keep you in a position to get stationary, put something unique in his face. Because the thing about Ilia is he's not going to compromise his own balance. He's not going to compromise his own stance. And he's not going to just jump into danger. He's going to wait for the opportunity to arise. And if Charles keeps moving, keeps being lateral, keeps Ilia on his toes, jump knees, anything up the middle, anything to be disruptive, he's got to do that to keep Ilia from getting comfortable and then eventually closing that distance. Once that happens, I don't like Charles's odds. But if Charles goes out there and makes it a dogfight, figures out how to attack more than just Ilia's head. A lot of guys that fight Ilia tend to headhunt because he's a shorter guy, so they feel like they can't get their punches down to his body, and they also feel like since his wrestling's really good, it's not really worth it to kick his body because then he can take you down from there. I think Charles needs to put all of that out of his mind. He needs to get real risky in this fight, throw whatever you've got at him, and hope to God that you get your hand raised.